My name's Steve Armstrong. I'm the social studies consultant, for those that don't know, from the Connecticut State Department of Education. And what we're asking you fine folks to do is to, in a brutally honest, can you talk about this? Honest, but with some level of compassion, if you know what I mean. There's a there's a fine line between brutally honest. I'm joking, but to look at the document with honesty, and to really make suggestions in the document on how it can be improved. You know, and I mean this with sincerity from doing it the last time. For anybody here to do a document, boy, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I don't know that there's a way to improve it. That doesn't really help much. So I would ask you to look at this with a truly critical eye. And you know, some of you have specialties that are yours. And if you see places where that specialty, Jim, Harmon, if you see specialties where you think your subject matter could be efficiently put in, please don't hesitate to state the obvious. Don't hesitate to make those suggestions. Okay. There's no assumption here that this is the best thing since sliced bread. You know, I mean, any document can have improvements. I think something that we're trying to navigate, quite frankly, is in U.S. history. For those that have taught U.S. history or work in schools, you know that many times U.S. history at the high school level ends somewhere in the Vietnam era or something like that. What we've put together, we'd be curious to know, or I'd be curious to know, we put together a unit on modern United States. And I'd like to be, I'm interested in what you think of that unit. Because I think what we're trying to do is encourage teachers to go beyond, I hate to say it, the Vietnam Wars. So what we're trying to do is, you know, people have said, well, we wouldn't know how to teach modern history. There's no framework to teach modern history if we wanted to. Well, with this new standards document, that goes away. Because we hope that we put together a reasonable and rational way to teach modern history. But we really, really like your feedback, especially on that one. All right. Tony, you ready?
Just a couple things to take into consideration that, first off, that the frameworks really was void of a lot of content. And that was on purpose when we created the frameworks, because it was a conceptual understanding, right? We were just putting out there, what are the concepts, the big overarching concepts that we want students to be able to do by the time they graduate. And now what we've done is we've added in the content, right? And this actually follows along with the intent of the C3, right? The C3 was intended to provide a conceptual framework from which standards could be derived or built upon. So that's what we've tried to do. Again, you're going to notice a couple things. Number one, you're going to notice, I already said this before, repetition. Okay, you're going to see repetition in examples. I think sometimes it's just because people were tired, or, you know, when, you know, you only have a small, you know, a small little toolbox to pull from. So you're pulling out your examples every time. So there is going to be some repetition. And I think, honestly, in the end, what we're going to do is we're going to end up honing down a lot of those examples and looking at all the examples, spreading them all out and trying to see where we can make sure that we at least touch on some of them. But of course, we have to focus in on what are the best examples for the content standard that we're trying to teach, right? We can't just come up with an example that connects to Mars because we love Mars. It's got to actually connect to what we're trying to do. So that's the first thing. Secondly, you're going to notice that the document is divided into 12 courses. Some of the big changes that you're going to see is that grades 6 and 7, they were together as a 6-7 kind of combined course. Now we've separated those out. and you'll see kind of how we've done that. Because we realize that 6th grade is not in middle school in every school system in Connecticut, right? Some it's in elementary school. So how do you account for the inequitable access to social studies at the middle school level, right? Also, we know that elementary, I've heard it as dire as 20 minutes per week for social studies for elementary. So what this document represents is our aspiration that social studies have parity with the other disciplines. I mean, how long is that going to take? 15 years probably to get everyone there. But this is our aspiration. This is what we'd like to see. You're going to see a lot more inclusion of economics, a lot more inclusion of economics, which actually mirrors what I hear in the classroom. Students are clamoring for financial literacy. And I'm like, well, it doesn't really fit with what we're doing in high school, but if we can work it into these earlier grades, that's going to be great. Also, you'll notice that there's a really big push on several different initiatives, mostly surrounding diversity, right? So we tried to include as many different perspectives as possible. We tried to have a representative document. We tried to have an inclusive document. That was our intent.
Some of the, to use Tony's term, repetition, you'll find, is also intentional. For example, we thought that we wanted 8th grade U.S. history to end with the Reconstruction era. We thought that was a logical place, but we also thought that the good beginning place for modern U.S. history is Reconstruction. So there you may see in some unit crossing and things, like the progressive era of the United States is found in a couple different places because the writers, so some of it is whatever you see, note it, but we can come back with a bit of it and say, you know what, that's true, but we wanted to do that. So I just wanted to make that point.
Okay, in just a moment, I'm just going to do a quick walkthrough of the documents just to kind of talk about our expectations. The first thing I want to show you is the actual document itself. You already have access to this, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Please do not share this, right? Private information. You'll notice that these are the courses here. Okay. Each course starts with a introduction. And then what you could see here is we have kind of the structure. So this is what we're looking at here. The first row is the topic. So each course is divided into anything between 3 and 10 topics, depending on the course. So the topic is not a unit. A topic is just a general area of study, not a curricular unit, because these decisions are going to be made at the district level. The thing about compelling questions, this is incomplete. We think this is how it's going to go, but we're not ready to really kind of hone it, kind of talk about that. So you can kind of skip that. We've actually erased it from the actual part of the document, but I did want to leave it in this little model here. This is an anchor standard. The anchor standard comes directly from the C3. We are not looking for feedback on the anchor standard. We're not changing that language at all. What we have done, our job was to create content standards. You can see it right here. Content standards that align to the anchor standard, but are also relevant to the course and the topic. Right. So we had to do a lot of thinking. Okay, here's what the C3 says students should be able to do at the K-2 level. How do you apply that idea to kindergarten? And how do you further apply it to me, my family, and culture? Right. So that's does it align is actually one of the things that you're going to be looking at when you're doing the review. And you'll also see down here that we have in parentheses, we have examples. And this is the part that is not on the public review survey, right? Because we just didn't get a chance to norm about exactly what should be in here. Like, should they be listed in alphabetical order? Should they be, should it be only names of actual policies as opposed to like historical phenomena, right? So like we didn't get to really, tune that in a little bit. So we still have to work on that. That's another thing you could probably give some feedback on. Go ahead, Steve.
So Tony, do you want them to actually review the EGs?
Oh yeah, that we're looking for some feedback on the EGs as well, for sure. So
So
we're looking
if
for
someone
anything
had
that,
an addition to an EG, they should note that.
yeah, I would put it as a comment. And you could just comment right on the side here. So we have it, and I'll go over all the different types of materials in just a moment, but this is really where you're going to be focusing your attention, is on the content standard, the EGs. Also, like, you could look at the topics, like, is this really the best topic? You know, you could probably suggest some different topics. I don't want to get too much in the weeds on that. Really, what we're looking for feedback here is on the content standards. So how will you provide the feedback? Well, this is all outlined in this review instrument that we created. I'll just blow this up a little bit. I'm not going to read this all to you. This is just like the theoretical framework. Like, where do we come up with this? It's based in the guiding principles. We got some information from the Nebraska Department of Education, and this explains your task. Record feedback for individual content standards as comments in the margin. Provide narrative feedback regarding the content standards as they are presented within each course, and I can show you where to do that. And then also complete a review summary, improvement action steps, and additional feedback in the standards reviewer cover sheet. And I'll go over that in just a moment. Where I want to direct your attention is there's some terms here in case you kind of forget like what a word means. It has the definitions here. And then below, you can see that there's A, right? So that matches with A above. Record feedback for individual content standards as comments in the margin. What are you going to base that feedback on? You can base it right here on A, and you can look at each standard and you can kind of look at it. I wouldn't say you need to go through and like, does it do this? Does it do this? Does it do this? I would just read it and be like, this doesn't seem measurable, or, this isn't very clear. You don't have to offer suggestions on how to reword it or anything like that. I mean, you can if you want to, but you don't have to. And then really, we're looking at these criteria that you could see over here on the left-hand side of the screen. And then B, this is standards grouped by course and topic. They're going to be assessed with this filing criteria. So you can see the bullets here. And this is going to be the information that's going to be entered directly into the standards document, or can be entered directly into the standard document. I would put it, sorry, let me scroll. At the end, at the end of the unit, or excuse me, at the end of the course, just hit enter a couple times and then type your review here. That's all outlined in the task description here. So it says here, provide feedback for individual content standards as comments, provide narrative feedback regarding the standards as they're presented within each course, like actually directly in the course. And the last piece here is the cover sheet.
Tony, before you move on, can I just ask to clarify?
Yes,
so
yes.
Either clarify and or give an example of what would be ideal for narrative feedback. Just going
so
quickly.
What I would do is I would look at, so really, again, this is going to be where your personal perspective is going to come into play. Right. So if I was you, Jim, I'd be looking at this, sure, through a social studies teacher's lens, but also through the environmental lens that we've been talking about recently. And then also so that's one lens you're going to apply. But also we have this, these criteria that are listed here. So do the standards as a group represent a comprehensive and inclusive representation of the events, issues, and context as this? So you're going to think about that question and you're going to respond to it. No, it doesn't, or yes, it does.
Okay. So if for example, there was something omitted or something that in order to be more complete, there should be a additional example or something, I do that in the narrative or in the comment? You
could do it either way. We're paying somebody to go through the data. So, I would do it whatever the way is most comfortable for you, but I'm just trying to outline as best as I know people like specifics. So if it was me, I would probably do it in the comment, and at the end, I would like write an overview for
Give a
each
perspective.
course,
Thank you.
like a
That
little
makes sense.
perspective. Right.
Perfect.
Yeah. That's what I would do.
I like that.
and
I like
yeah,
that.
that's kind of what we're looking for here.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
then part C, real quick, it's this cover sheet here. Real easy. Just put your name on it, your organization, email, and then like think about all your feedback that you gave for the entire document. Give me a little summary of your overall review. So like thinking about the entire thing after you've done all the review, come back and just type up what are the top level takeaways that you want to share with us, like on terms of revision. Please provide us some action steps for improving the document, like specific, like first, include more environmental in grade 6, or work on the language for for economic standards in elementary grades. Like, what are the specific things that we can do to make it better? And then if there's anything that like the checklist doesn't cover, or like any other information that we didn't really ask for your input on, please provide it underneath additional feedback. Okay. Now, if you don't feel comfortable typing directly into that standards document, you can also put your review feedback, course by course in this document. That would be fine with me too. I would just maybe write like, go to the next page and be like, hit the wrong button, kindergarten.
So Tony, just to be clear, you want the people to evaluate every individual standard in the document?
Yeah, I mean, again, I would just read them all, and then like if anything like sticks out as like really awesome, maybe you can say, wow, this is really great. But if anything like is egregious, like it's not clear, then please leave a comment on that individual standard. But we're not looking necessarily for you to comment on every standard.
That was my exact question.
Yeah,
There's
just
not
the
a
ones
need
that
for
like stick out. Okay, so that's basically the entire process. And then what you'll do is you will email that back to us at the end. And again, we're going to take all this information, which it's going to be a ton because there's 15 of y'all plus 4 at the national level. And we're going to cull all that data. Man, that's going to be a lot of work. And we're going to go ahead and make some improvements based on that. And that's why we're hiring somebody to help us with that, because it's too big for a teacher.
Tony, if someone has a question about during the procedure, they should email you?
Yeah, that's a great point. Why don't you go ahead and email, just to keep it all together, just email it right to the CCSS email, the Gmail there, just because that's where you got the email from, and then it'll just be easier.
If you have questions along the way, if you're not sure of the process, just send, rather than muddle along, just send in the email.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I might suggest, Tony, and disagree with me if you can, if your feedback is just going to be good job, I wouldn't do that. I think if you could show a way to improve it, I think that's the time to do comment. In general, that's the time to do comments, I think, on everything.
And then when you get to the end of the whole review and you're like doing the final review, if you could throw in some nice things, I'd like to hear some nice things, but through the document, go ahead and tear it up, tear it up. That's for sure. That's why we're doing this.
I think the only question I had, which you answered in the course of this, was not addressing the anchor standards and leaving them alone.
Yeah.
Because when I opened it first, the first time, I immediately went to those. So now it's good to know that I'm not. So that was a good
I would use those. I would look
clarification.
at them and be like, does this content standard really match the anchor standard? Because this is something that came up time and time again. The anchor standard says use evidence or select sources or something like that. And this content standard says nothing about sources. And that's an issue. I think we weeded out as many of those as possible, but like really think about the anchor standard. Like, does this content standard really align with what the expectation is of the anchor standard? That's, we could use some feedback on that. That's for sure.
Tony, I thought of something else that based on what I saw with the writing, there may be differences in the number or the depth of examples for content standards.
Yes.
Is there a Is there any consensus as to what would be a reasonable amount? Like if I saw 3 examples, another one may have 9, another one may have 5, is there anything that,
We tried to weed that down as much as possible, but again, we just haven't, through this process, we haven't had a chance to norm what goes,
Yeah.
because that's actually a very, it seems like, oh, just put examples in there. No, it's a very serious thing that we have to be
I
very
know,
careful of.
yeah,
So if it's like, we already know that there's too few and too many, so you don't have to comment like, oh, a couple more here. But if you have like a specific example you'd like to see in there, that would be
Okay.
great. Like add that, that's awesome. But like something like, there's too many examples here. Yes, we know there are too many examples. In some cases, we just said, let's list every woman that we could think of that had something to do with the Civil War, just so
Yep.
they're in there, and then we'll figure out what to do with everybody later. And I'm not trying to be flippant about, or flip about like, they don't matter, because they do matter, but it's like, at this point, we haven't honed that part of it yet. And that's one thing
Okay.
that Steve and I are going to work on, over the next
think-
month, by the time we figure this out. Go ahead, Steve.
I think if you find EGs that don't work, note those. If you
Yeah.
can add EGs, note those. But I wouldn't worry. I think, Jim, generally, I think if you look at I think the appropriate number, again, there is none, but might be in the 3 to
4,
5,
5, 6.
4
Yeah.
to 6, maybe something like
okay,
that.
that's what I was thinking too, okay. So it's enough to give guidance to the teacher, but it's not exhaustive, it shouldn't be
Not a
exhaustive.
curriculum.
Yeah.
The way I see it is I could see a teacher going in here and seeing like, I don't know, Public Act 19-12 and be like, I don't know what that is. And then go to Google and look it up and be like, oh, I can make a whole lesson plan on this because I just learned about it. And, they can integrate it into their, it's like a guide.
Mhm.
But then be like, oh, this isn't the best example. I know a better example that my kids would care more about. You use that example because the content standard isn't necessarily the EG.
Right,
know?
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
Good,
righty.
thank you.
Okay, folks. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks,
Thanks,
Tony.
really-
Thank you, Steve.
Really appreciate it. Really
Appreciate it.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you guys too.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.